Just to introduce our final session today, Emma Lindley. Great to see you here again, Emma, founder of Innovate Identity. Emma has been instrumental in the development of UK identity market since 2003, initially working for GBG PLC as part of the team, developed and took to market ID3. In 2012, she founded Innovate Identity, an independent consulting firm. Emma is recognised in the Innovate Finance Power List for Women in Tech, in FinTech 2016, forgive me. No Identity Top 100 Leaders in Identity 2017, and was voted CEO of the Year at the One World Identity Awards. Smoking hot fireside chat. Don and Emma are going to... Don and Emma are going to lead this session, and Don will introduce Sandy Porter for part of the session, Strategy and Business Director, Development Director.
So, as many of you know, I've had a rule in these kinds of workshops before that we would not talk about three things: Brexit, blockchain, and Trump. The Trump thing still holds. Lord Maud talked about Brexit. But blockchain is changing. I have been a skeptic and remain skeptical on blockchain. But we now have a raft of new members joining OIX with blockchain and identity in mind. And Sandy's going to talk about one set of member demand.
Okay, guys. Sandy Porter, I'm with Avoca Secure, and I joined OIX when I still had colour in my hair, so Don and I know each other pretty well. So if I look through, we've kind of, for those who don't know, we've delivered a couple of platforms into Verify, previously did the Skills Funding Agency. So we came from quite a traditional background from the identity side of it. In terms of working through, like Don, I became Saul on the road to Damascus a little while ago around blockchain. I was a complete skeptic. And I suppose over the last year, we've taken a good look at blockchain, because I think in innovating on identity attribute platforms, sort of personal data stores, one has to evaluate technology. So if I look at the ends of the spectrum, unfortunately, in most of the positioning of blockchain, you either get people who are for it or people who are totally into the hype on it. But what we looked at was blockchain as an enabler. Could the technology be an enabling technology for the use with an identity? And in the first instance is the distributed sort of ability for it. Blockchain gives a very interesting distributed sort of network, and I learned a little bit of a lesson working with one of the top 10 hedge funds about 15 years ago. They had an issue where London and Geneva got knocked out on trading platforms, and they had a huge amount of money invested, and it was basically a black swan hit them. They still had Singapore running, Hong Kong running, and New York. And they were trying to work out how the hell they got information to move across. Well, there was one thing running, it was called Gmail. And they're going, what the hell do we do? How do we know it's really the right people? I think they broke the regs, basically. I'm not going to give their name. They broke the regs where they divided trades up into 5, used 5 separate Gmail accounts, sent the trades to New York from London, and they were reassembled because the risk was so high at staying out of the market. So I think when we look at anything within our identity ecosystem, one of the first places I looked at, that blockchain has that type of potential capability, the distribution. So that interested us sort of greatly. I'm going to use my notes a little, sorry. Single point of failure. So that takes out your single point of failure aspect on blockchain. They've got irrefutable logs. That became very powerful to what we were looking at. There was the ability potentially for minimal disclosure. It was a great way for users to control and disclose selective information. You can build into it revocation and permissioned access to the data from that. But I think overall, what it has become is the potential for an enabling technology. But if I'm giving anyone sort of advice who's in the kind of identity businesses, are some of the global banks going to instantly jump in on it? Well, no, they're not. So what we've done as I think any of the sensible ones are, you hybrid. You use some blockchain, it's optional. You don't have to use it. It's just a better way of doing an awful lot of what we do. And there's one other little bit within it that I think is very powerful, is the smart contracts. Smart contracts are just rules. Having distributed rules on the blockchain is very, very powerful. And I think importantly, if you're going to use the blockchain, don't get tied to one install, because you're just moving the problem. Actually, this has to be agnostic.
Thank you, sir. That's a great segue for one of the announcements that we want to make. So I'm being dragged kicking and screaming into this blockchain and identity stuff, so I'm going to embrace it as best we can, but also embrace it in an OIX kind of way.
Are you going to tell us you're a Satoshi Nakamoto, Don?
Yes.
Wait for the announcement, everyone.
That's right. So we're getting into this blockchain piece in an OIX kind of way. We're looking at blockchain and its relevance to identity systems at scale is the big headline. What OIX does is that we really try not to boil the ocean. We look at ponds, we look at specific pain points. You've seen it in all of our white papers. So we're going to create a distributed ledger forum as part of OIX. I guess part of the reason for the forum is a belief that I have and that I think is shared. It's a bit orthogonal to Sandy's point. I think that next year we'll see several things happen in the broader blockchain world. Certainly, I believe, personal opinion, that we'll see the crash of Bitcoin in 2018. I think we will see a next generation set of consortiums led by banks in 2018. And I think what is responsible for both the crash of Bitcoin and the ascendancy of banks' embrace of distributed ledger technology is governance. The problem with blockchain today, it's not fast enough, it's not secure enough, it's not trusted enough. Hence the crash that I'm predicting. That's all Bitcoin oriented, but in identity we need to do the same thing. We need to be able to transact in a trusted way at a very high volume and velocity and variety. With identity systems, we need to have banking-grade security. And lastly, and most importantly, we need to have impeccable governance. The reason that blockchain and Bitcoin exchanges are failing, the reason that the Chinese government is kicking out them is that without government involvement in some substantive way, they just won't work. So what OIX is good at is the rules part. Remember we talked about tools, OpenID Foundation, rules, OIX. So what OIX wants to do is apply what we think we know a lot about, which are trust frameworks. We have a whole series of trust framework papers that will take you and your lawyers through an exhaustive look at liability in identity systems, how you do, what is a trust framework, what are the standards for a trust framework. So we're going to be applying this in a couple of different ways. So we're creating a distributed ledger technology forum. We're going to do that in 3 different instances. One, we're going to partner with the Accord project, which is looking at the governance of smart contracts. Think of it as trust frameworks for smart contracts. So Sandy rightfully pointed out one of the key drivers in the success of the governance and the deployment of distributed ledger technology and identity. We need impeccable governance. We need to make sure that smart contracts can be trusted. So we're creating a distributed ledger technology forum. We have a partnership with the Accord project around smart contracts. They want to create a set of standards for smart contracts. So they've come to the OIX as a platform for the development of that. The standard stuff is so boring by the end of the day. We should have given you each a nickel for every time someone said standards. But it applies in the case of governance. It applies in the case of trust. So we're working with the Accord project, and we also have plans to do a series of workshops like this, starting in the US, and in conjunction with the Stanford School of Law and Informatics. Stanford has a soft spot in its heart for OIX, not the least of which many of the major donors to Stanford are sitting on the board of directors of the Open Identity Exchange on a global basis. So we're going to take a laser focus on the role of smart contracts in distributed ledger technology platforms, blockchain, for identity systems at scale. By so doing, what we want to do is equip you in this room, and our members in particular, with a constant stream of information about how, in the real world, in what I predict will be an enormously confusing 2018 when it comes to things around blockchain, we want to keep kind of a true north around what is good governance for distributed ledger systems and identity systems at scale. All this is part of what we do here at OIX, which is to gather a team of rivals, and it was evident in the panel you just saw. There are no two more competitive organizations than Ping and ForgeRock. But here they sit in an OIX context because we have, not because they like each other, but we know that we have to work together in order to create this new ecosystem, to expand the market that we're talking about in terms of identity systems and services. So we'll be launching the Blockchain Forum for Identity in January. This is an opportunity to join in that forum. We've got some leadership from our members. We always can use more. And we think that by tuning into the forum, you'll be hearing a constant conversation occurring from people that are not in this room. Lawyers. My opinion, one of the things that's holding back the adoption of distributed ledger technology in many trust frameworks is that lawyers don't get identity. It's a very rare lawyer, Hans is here somewhere, that really can speak identity. So we have a deliberate program at OIX to begin to educate lawyers, the lawyers that work for OIX members, and the lawyers who represent OIX members, to bring them up to speed on identity systems and the role of governance in distributed ledger technology applications. We think that by educating a cadre of lawyers, beginning in Silicon Valley, and then moving later in the year back here to London, we can begin to help correct what is currently a technology-led discussion.
That sounds pretty cool.
Thank you.
When does that start?
It starts in January.
Cool.
So this is a heads up. You'll hear more about it on the on the OIX website. And it'll be called the BIG Forum, right? Blockchain and Identity and Governance.
In fact,
It's already up. Thank you, Sue. It's already
that
up.
sounds good.
Yeah, you think
it does.
so?
Yeah, I like the sound of that.
Okay.
That sounds good.
Good.
Yeah.
Did I miss anything?
I don't think so. I don't know what you were thinking. This is a fireside chat.
Indeed.
Okay, so I've got one thing to add to that. I've been involved in a little bit of writing a paper about that stuff, which I'm going to publish with somebody that you may or may not have heard of, Dave Birch. So we're going to be publishing.
This is the odd couple, Dave Birch and Emma Lindley.
So that was sponsored by a Media Network, and we're going to be publishing some of the findings from that sort of probably in January as well. So that sounds like it's good timing.
Indeed.
Cool. So we heard from Post Office and Corios earlier on today as to why those organisations are joining OIX. What you know, we've got some members here, I guess we've got some non-members here. If you're going to talk to, you know, the non-members in the audience that might be thinking about joining and the members in the audience that, you know, are kind of going to be getting their renewal notifications this year, what are the things that you would say OIX are going to be doing during 2018 that are the real key reasons as to why organisations should be stay involved with OIX?
2018, we're going to do the blockchain thing.
Which is cool.
We're going to announce what we call a social media support program. And what this is all about is that companies today communicate directly to the marketplace. They use social media to the fairly well. That's all well and good. But if you're a member of the OIX, you have another channel available to you, which is a, we think, trusted, authoritative voice in the marketplace. It's the voice of a non-profit, technology-agnostic, truly neutral and global organization. So what we want to do is to be able to give our members the opportunity of publishing white papers using the OIX brand and the OIX channel. Why is that? Turns out because of trust. If I get an OIX paper from Don's Bar and Grill, a white paper from Don's Bar and Grill, I'm going to be a little bit suspicious that it's favoring Don's Bar and Grill and not Emma's. So what we want to do is continue to build this brand called OIX and have it be a trusted place where people like you in the audience can have a sense that I'm reading this white paper and I can trust it, that it's not a thinly veiled sales pitch or it's not skewing information from one side to the other. So we've got a boatload of white papers in the pipeline, and we expect that a whole bunch more are coming. So as mentioned before, we are working closely with the Open Banking Implementation Entity with a series of white papers that we think first and foremost will be useful to the members, which is one, to kind of capture this ecosystem that was described today. I pay a lot of attention to this, but even I get confused about, okay, how does PSD2 connect with GDPR? How does that connect with whatever the Japanese are doing? And what just happened there? So the first white paper will kind of do a snapshot and give members a sense of the state of play. Then what we want to do, in collaboration with our colleagues at the Open Banking Implementation Entity and our colleagues at UK Finance, is to begin to roll out throughout 2018 a set of workshops and white papers that allow our members and the community at large to track these changes, the intended and unintended changes that open banking will drive. I think Ralph and others did a great job of saying, good things are coming with open banking, but a whole lot of stuff is going to get initiated that it's going to be confusing.
So do you think we might address that gnarly L word, the liability issue?
What OIX does is we go into the most boring part of technology, which is identity, and we go even more boring, which is to talk about liability in identity systems at scale. We're doing that for two reasons. One, it's kind of joint legal research. No one company or no SME can collect all that research and have it be authoritative. And we want to serve the needs of a very important part of our membership, which you represent, which are small SMEs and startups. We want to give them the benefit of the knowledge that's being created in the community. We're going to do that through white papers and through these workshops that we'll be scheduling in conjunction with UK Finance and OBI. I think things are going to be very positive, but they're really going to be crazy in the first part of next year because of the moving targets that we have with PSD2, GDPR, et cetera.
Okay, so that sounds like it's two things. So if I'm a kind of general member and if I've got a white paper, then I can come to the Open Identity Exchange and have a chat about how I might use that kind of social media.
That's right. And
okay.
So part of what OIX does is it amplifies the market messaging of our members, as long as that messaging isn't self-serving. So we want to keep this conversation going online.
Okay, and then the second thing is going to be doing more projects doing more white papers, as OIX always has done, and promoting that for the benefit of the members and the wider, identity community and beyond.
We do indeed.
Okay.
The other thing that we want to get smart on, and we just hinted at it earlier, is that we think that a real marketplace is emerging because the insurance companies are beginning to get interested. And when you can get insurers involved in creating policies around identity systems, then you know that you've got a real robust ecosystem. So what we want to do, hopefully, is to reach out to the industry experts that are largely here in London, companies like Lloyd's and others that have a history of being on the leading edge of insurance, to educate them and have them come back to this community and talk about the role of insurance in identity systems at scale. We have cyber insurance today. The next insurance product could be, and I think will be, indemnifying different actors in this ecosystem around their liability and their risk associated with handling data.
That sounds cool. So you used an interesting word there, and it was industry. Now I know when I kind of started out in the kind of identity space, I wouldn't have called it an industry. I guess now we roll forward a few years, and I think that is what we're kind of talking about. We're talking about this being an industry. There's a lot more people in the room now than there were when we started out with OIX, sort of 5 years ago. Is the stuff that OIX is doing in that area, perhaps around sort of professional, kind of professionalising this industry, and is OIX supporting work in that area?
We like to think that we're at the beginning of it. So we will announce sometime in early 2018 a collaboration with a new organization called ID Pro, Identity Pro. And what we have a handshake on, and we'll soon announce formally next year, is how do we provide a professional certification for identity professionals? How do we give them the same status that privacy professionals have, or Microsoft has a whole series of professional accreditation. One of the things that's happening is that, with few exceptions, you can't go to school on identity. And even if you did go to graduate school on identity, the very curriculum that you'd go to would be shifting under your feet. So how do we recognize the professionalism of individuals in the ecosystem? Well, it turns out that attending an OIX workshop, certainly being part of a project, and certainly co-authoring a white paper is a credential as an identity professional. So together with the ID Pro organization, we want to set up a system that for those that choose, you can log in your attendance at a workshop like this, your participation in a project that you've heard about, and your contribution to a white paper, and get CPE credits for it. It's very new, it's a new system, but again, it's a sign of maturation of the industry and the business that we're talking about. I think it's really critical that we recognize those kinds of contribution of individuals, and particularly for younger folks, to give them a career path that can be built on identity.
Younger folks like me.
Yeah.
That's what you meant, Don.
That's what I meant.
Okay, cool. So that sounds like we're doing some cool stuff.
Yeah.
So I think the last thing we're due to talk about
Okay.
is the general member election.
Yes.
So I've been honoured to be general member representative over the last 18 months. I think it's a little bit longer than it was supposed to be. I've obviously worked with all the other board members, people like Sarah, the agitator in the room over there. It was good. But it's time for a new general member to be elected. So I don't know if you want to tell the audience about.
So the way this works is that we really think that it's important that OIX be mindful of, again, entrepreneurs, small companies, SMEs in this ecosystem. So we want to have that group have a distinctive and clear representative on the board. So we will be asking in January for small and medium-sized members of OIX to elect a representative. So the campaign season should be beginning soon. I think the person to my right just gave her first speech in that for re-election, but we'll open it up. But we want to make sure that this model that we operate on is inclusive and diverse. Yes, it is true that OIX was founded by the companies that need interoperability the most, people like Microsoft and Google and PayPal and others like that, Experian and LexisNexis, HSBC and Barclays. What we now have at OIX is truly a cross-industry representation on the board. That's important for identity, for all the obvious reasons. But we don't want to lose sight of the innovation and the expertise of small companies. So that's one measure that we have to make sure that in the governance of OIX, those folks are represented. By the way, the same thing is true in the OpenID Foundation that I also lead. There'll be a member election for a representative on that board. This is community building, and we want to have community representation.
Cool.
That's it. Well, just a few concluding thoughts. I know it's been a long day. I do appreciate you sacrificing what was a beautiful afternoon in London. I hope this investment of your time has been valuable. The way that we like to end is to, again, invite you to be part of this dialogue. Help shape the agenda for OIX in the UK and Europe. It's my observation that the chasm between the European model of consent and control of data, identity data, is widening almost on a daily basis from the time that I spend in Silicon Valley. That's a culture of one and done. I consent, bang, go for it. And the huge amounts of venture capital that's pouring into identity companies and startup are largely built on the monetization of personally identifying information. That's fact. The American direction of travel in a regulatory way is going for less and less regulation at a time when the Europeans, as we've talked about exhaustively today, is moving in a different direction. So what we want to make sure is that OIX is embracing both those models and providing some kind of readout to you so that the systems and the services that you build will work here in the UK and certainly be interoperable in the European Union, but also reference the fact of life in the identity ecosystem, that there are increasingly powerful platform players based on identity with massive amounts of capital, investing in AI, investing in distributed ledger technology, et cetera. So it's going to be a wild ride in 2018, and I certainly would be honored if all of you went for it with your colleagues at OIX.
All the OIX projects that have been mentioned today, together with Lytest and TSAT, are on the website. There's plenty from me. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed today. Thank you, Don. Thank you, Emma. Last word from Don.
Last word from me. I just wanted to recognize the great leadership and contribution of Sue Dawes, if you would mind.
Woo-hoo!
When Sue and I started working together, she had flame red hair, and now as a result of that, she's got gray. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.